Live. Good.
Welcome to this virtual open day at ISS. We're just starting now. We're here in The Hague. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon right now. And we know that we have participants from all over the world. For some of you, it's still early in the morning. Others, it's late in the evening, but we're happy to have you all here. We've heard that over 250 people registered for this virtual open day, and everyone's now starting to get in and to join this virtual open day. My name is Wieke Blauw. I'm a policy officer here at ISS, and I will give a presentation during this virtual open day on the applications for the NFP, the Netherlands Fellowship Program. So this virtual open day is really dedicated to the NFP application procedure, and I hope to provide you with a lot of information and answer your questions as well. There are 2 students here with me, Jeremiah from the Philippines and Naomi from Kenya. They both have an NFP scholarship, and they will share their experiences and how they obtained the NFP fellowship with you. We also have a question and answer session. It's up and running. If you have a question already or during the presentation, you can ask them. And after my presentation and the introduction by Jeremiah and Naomi, we will try to answer as many questions as possible. In this presentation, I will talk you shortly through the NFP application procedure. I will explain to you about the eligibility for an NFP scholarship, about the countries from which you can apply for an NFP scholarship, about the motivation, and about the practical side of how to go online and to apply for a scholarship. All of this to help you to improve your application and to introduce you on how to get an NFP scholarship. I would like to start now with the NFP application procedure. When you want to apply for a scholarship, you first have to apply and to be admitted to the ISS Master Program. Most of you will have done so already. Some of you will still be in the procedure, and I can assure you that we have a very dedicated admission officer who are processing applications as soon as possible, and who can then, upon acceptance to the program, you will receive a link to apply for an NFP scholarship. The NFP system is open already. It started last week on the 2nd of February, and it will be open till the 9th of March. So it's quite some time that you have to prepare your application and to submit your application. However, we advise you to apply as soon as possible, because as soon as you are in the system, we are checking your application, checking whether it's complete, whether the right information is provided, and we can also advise you how to improve your application. So please don't wait till the last moment, but apply as soon as possible. The procedure is as follows. The system is now open for applications. ISS is allowed to nominate a certain number of candidates for an NFP scholarship. So we're making a first shifting to select those candidates we think are best suitable for the program. Based on our nominations, the Dutch Embassy is looking at the nominated candidates, and they are also making their selection. And after that, the system will make the final selection, and the decision will be reached by the 31st of May. End of May, ISS will hear who will get a scholarship, and we will inform the people who have been selected. So, like I said, ISS is nominating the candidates, and we are trying to select the best candidates for the NFP program. So what we're looking at is the countries that you're coming from. I get back to that later. The priorities of the embassy, and also at your motivation statement and the employer statement. The embassies are also looking at the applications from the perspective of who are the people who fit best into the priorities of the NFP program. So they're ticking boxes on whether it fits within one of the priorities. There are 4 priorities. One is on water, one is on rule of law, one is on reproductive health, and the 4th one is on food security. So if you're working in one of those areas or want to study in one of those areas, that gives you an extra point, so to say. They also look at their own priorities from of the embassy, your motivation, and also whether you submitted all the correct documents. I'll get back to that later. An important thing I have to mention is that sometimes our emails get into the spam box. So if you are from an NFP country, are accepted to the program, but did not get an invitation to apply for NFP, please check your spam box first. I would now like to elaborate a bit further on the eligibility. People from 50 countries are eligible for the NFP program. In the next slide later on, you will see which countries those are, and we will give you then time to check on that. You also have to be nominated by your employer for an NFP scholarship. That means that you have to have an employer statement. The employer statement is a fixed format which you can find on the ISS website, and it should be of the current employer. The employer should also express a commitment that you will keep your job after you've returned to your own country. And what is very important in the employer statement, that there is an action plan attached to it. We've seen the first applications already coming in, and we saw some people who submitted an application which was not in line with the application we received earlier as ISS. So your employer has changed compared to the application that you submitted to ISS. That makes us a bit suspicious. So if you've done so, please make very sure that you explain why your employer in your application to ISS is different from your employer as described in your application to NFP. Your employer should be a real employer, and you should be aware that the embassy is contacting your employer to check whether you are indeed working there and to see at what position you are at the moment, and to check whether you are indeed nominated and how the employer thinks to benefit from you being sent to the ISS. So please make sure also with the person who is signing the employer statement that they can be reachable, that they are reachable by phone or by email, because in the last round we've seen quite some people who were non-eligible because the embassy could not reach the employer. So it's important to mention this to your employer. People who are working with an international organization are not eligible for an NFP scholarship. By international organization, I'm talking about United Nations, UN organizations, UNDP, UNICEF, World Bank, IMF, World Health Organization, but also international NGOs like Save the Children or like Oxfam. These organizations are considered to have an own budget for staff development. I know that many people are on a local contract with those organizations and do not have access to those training opportunities offered by the international organization. But the decision of the scholarship program was that those candidates are not eligible. So I'm sorry to say that we've raised this with the Dutch government, that this is not fair, but for now we can't do anything about it. For some countries, we need a government statement. That is a requirement of the government of your own country. Your employer might know about this government statement. In the next slide, you will see for which countries a government statement is required. In most countries, it's a permission for you to leave the country and to study abroad. And if you have unclarity or uncertainty about what kind of government statement is needed, please contact us, because we have examples of different countries and we can help you with that. Last but not least, you are allowed to apply only once for the NFP program. It's a central system for the whole of the Netherlands. So if you're applying for the ISS and also for the University of Amsterdam or another university, in the system those two applications will come together and you will be kicked out for both programs. So please make up your mind and decide for which program to apply in the NFP system. One more thing is, we did get questions last time about second admissions, as we call them, people who were accepted last year and want to try it again this year, those people do get in. So if you are admitted last year and you asked for a deferral to this year, please do apply, because people do get scholarships, also if it's only in the second year. Well, in the next overview, we'll see the countries that are eligible. There are two lists of countries. One is category 1, the other one is category 2. 80% of the budget is going to category 1 countries, 20% to the other category. But people who are from countries in category 2 do get in. Jeremiah is a good example of that. So please also, if you're coming from those countries, do not think that you won't have a chance to get in, because also those people get scholarships. But in the nominations that we make, we take into account this distribution over the category 1 and category 2 countries. We also have to take into account that 50% of the scholarships are going to candidates from Africa, and also 50% of the scholarships are going to female candidates. So we take that into account also together with the priorities of the embassies in the nominations that we make. Now I would like to say something about your motivation. I think it's important that you realize what the purpose of the NFP program is. And the purpose is capacity building within your country and your organization. So it's not about personal development or personal leadership, it's capacity building of your country and of the organization that you work with. Therefore also the employer statement is found to be crucial in your application. The employer statement should include an action plan in which you describe in concrete and realistic terms how you think that your organization is going to benefit from your training here in ISS. And I would like to emphasize that this should be realistic. So you can't change the world based on a program studied in the Netherlands, unfortunately. So saying peace to the world, for example, is not realistic. So please make it as concrete as possible. What are you going to do with your knowledge and your experience when you're coming back to your employer, and how are you going to disseminate your knowledge and expertise to your colleagues and to the organization as a whole. When you're looking at your motivation and also at the action plan, it's important to keep in the back of your mind the priorities of the NFP. I just mentioned them, you can also find them on our website. It's food securities, it's sexual and reproductive health and rights, it's the rule of law, and it's water. And make sure in your motivation and also in the action plan that you're using the same word. You should realize that the fellowship officer at the Dutch embassy has to go through many applications. So they can't read every application carefully, they have to read through it, glance through it. So if you're working on poverty alleviation in a country or in a region by increasing crop production, for example, then don't say you're working on poverty alleviation, but say that you're working with food security. That's basically what you're doing. If you're working with children, mention the words children's rights, mention the word gender, mention the words sexual and reproductive health. They are related, but you might use other wording. Please make sure that you use the same jargon that is used by the NFP program. If you're working with an anti-corruption unit, we've seen it in the past, please say that you pay attention to the rule of law. So try to read through the motivation that you're writing with the eyes of a fellowship officer at the Dutch embassy. Also, please make sure that there's coherence between your motivation and the organization that you work with. That it's realistic in terms of doable and related to your work, what your motivation is. And a very practical point is there's a limited number of characters that your motivation can have. It's 1,000 characters. It's not 1,000 words. So I gave you the sentence, this is not 7 characters, but 32 characters. And the system just stops when the box is filled. So please make sure that you have prepared a good motivation of the right length. So I'm now getting more into the practicalities. Um, the system, the NFP system, you can only enter once. You can't save it and go back to your previous application. So you have to prepare all documents in advance. So make sure that you have a PDF of all the documents. Have a PDF of your employer statement, of your government statement, of a valid passport, or if you don't have a passport yet, a valid ID card. Make sure that you prepared a motivation and check the number of the characters. So maybe you want to prepare a Word document where you can cut and paste the text that you've written in the system. And have everything prepared before you enter the system. So, like I said, you can only enter it once. But if you afterwards find out that you have to change anything, we in the back office can still do it. So if you made a mistake or if you want to upload the correct government statement, send a message to Marianne van Dieren, my colleague in the admission office, and she can go in the back office and upload and change text that you've submitted. Like I said before, apply as soon as possible, because then we can see what your application is and we can help you to improve it if needed, or to check on whether you submitted the right information. I think you are starting already to ask questions in the chat room. Please continue to do so. I'd first like to give the floor to Jeremiah and Naomi, and after that we will answer your questions as good as possible. Jeremiah, maybe you can introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi, I'm Jeremiah de Guzman. Call me Jerry. I'm from the Philippines, and I work as a Senior Economic Development Specialist for the National Economic and Development Authority of the Philippines. And I work for in the 4 priorities mentioned by mentioned as to the priorities of the NFP. I guess I fall under rule of law because I work with the governance staff of the Ministry of Economics in the Philippines.
Thank you. And can you say something about how you prepared for your application?
There's actually 2 of my bosses, the assistant director and my chief, studied in the ISS before.
Oh, really?
So I already have some ideas of how I could actually get a competitive advantage in terms of writing my motivation. So there, I actually put in first my work, what my position is doing, and second, how studying in ISS or how studying governance and development policy, that is my major, will help in the execution of my task in NEDA, in the Ministry of Economics. So I was actually, I tried to be as concrete as possible, as mentioned, and I put some concrete activities. Like for instance, I put in there some symposium, not really a big one, but maybe just gathering in office where I could share my ideas, share what I learned here. So my tip is actually to be very specific in terms of how you would implement your program when you get back into your employer. And then second, be a little creative as well. I could remember putting in my motivation how I am excited to talk with my professors in the cafeteria here in the 2nd floor. Then how I would love to visit the Scheveningen beach. So try to be creative as well, as much as you are academic in writing your motivation letter.
Thank you. Naomi, maybe you can introduce yourself.
My name is Naomi Mwangi. I'm from Kenya. I am an advocate working with the Federation of Women Lawyers Association in Kenya. And I applied for the NFP scholarship. And perhaps to just give a few pointers about that is that the first thing that I did is I checked out the country's strategic plan for Kenya. And based on that, then to just see what are the priorities for the Netherlands Embassy in Kenya, so that would then enable me to be able to somehow craft my application to sort of suit that, so that I'd give myself an edge over, other applicants, because then it's quite competitive. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we should now give the floor to our audience. Darren, do you have a question for one of us?
Yes. there's a lot of questions about government statement, Vika. Many people are not sure which country, what information is needed, and things like that. So can you please elaborate on that?
Yeah, if maybe you can go back to the slide with the overview of the countries.
Yeah.
Because there's a special column which indicates whether a government statement is needed. I think for the Philippines there's also a government statement needed, so maybe you can say a bit more afterwards. It's a requirement of the government of your own country. It's not a requirement of the Netherlands government. So it's it's a kind of document stating that this is a person that is acknowledged that he or she will be going abroad to study in the Netherlands. And in some countries, it's one specific organization who is supposed to give out the government statements. In other countries, it can be done by the employer, but that's different per country. So if your own employer doesn't know it or you can't find the information in your own country, please check it with our admission office because they know who should be the person to provide a government statement. Maybe you can explain how the situation is in the Philippines?
When I was actually preparing for all the requirements for the NFP, basically at first there is actually an internal policy in NEDA in my organization as to how I could secure the commitment letter required by NFP. So I wrote the memo and then attached is my implementation plan, which is also required for the NFP application. And I secured approval from our big boss, from the secretary, and then it was actually just a signature saying that yes, she will go back after the program, and yes, the study will actually contribute to the execution of her task in the organization. And then third, yes, it's actually just saying that yes, it is of big help to the country in general. So, and it was actually a little easy for me given that I work for the government, and it is sort of direct in terms of how I could justify the contribution of my program to my work.
Okay. Well, I hope this answered the question that many of you had. And if not, please do raise it with our student officer, with Marianne van Dieren, who can give you more information.
Okay. Another question is with regards to passport validation. One of the prospects asks if her passport or his passport ends next year in April. Should I do the renewal already now, or what shall I do?
You have to have a valid passport when you are entering the Netherlands. So you will have to have a valid passport in September 2017. If your passport is indeed valid till next year, April, for example, it's still valid for quite a long time after you're coming to the Netherlands, so that should be okay. But it depends also. If it's valid till September or October, I would not take the risk and renew it before that. But if it's valid for quite some time after the start of the program, you can renew it probably while you're here in the Netherlands. But that's also something to check with the own authorities in your country. And if it's not valid at the moment, I would advise you to make sure that it is valid or to upload an ID, because we have seen in the past that embassies turn down applications with not a valid passport anymore, and then it's better to upload an identity card which is valid.
Okay. There is one, thank you, Vika. There is one very specific question. In the employer statement, there is a part that mentions function and then task. Students are asking what's the difference between these two.
That is indeed a very specific question. I think a function could be you are a project officer, or you are a policy officer, that is the function, or you are a secretary to a committee, that's a function. And task is that you are preparing policy briefs, that you are making notes of meetings, or drafting advices for a certain committee. That's in general terms the division between a function and a task.
Okay. Another quick question from the government statement is this question is very popular apparently, this team. Somebody says, I thought the government statement is for applicants working in government only. Does this also apply to people working in academia, for example?
That depends on the country that you're coming from. For some countries, there's only a government statement needed for people working as a government officials.
Yeah.
For other countries, it's needed for everyone in the country. So that's something to check in your own country.
Okay. Can you please explain the number of characters when writing the motivation in Atlas? Because there's some confusion with that.
Okay. The maximum number is 1,000 characters. A character is also a space between two words. That's also character. So I gave the example of this is not 7 characters but 32. In the motivation it's there. Then the word this has 4 characters. But if you add up everything that's there, it's 32 characters. You have to count the letter and the spaces between, and also the 7 is a character. So that's something, and in Word there is a function to a word count, and a word count function also has the function to count the words and the characters.
Okay.
And to stay on the safe side, make sure it's 950 words.
Yeah. Maybe a question for the 2 current students. What kind of pointers can you give the prospect when it comes to writing your motivation in Atlas? Each one of you can go.
Okay.
Well, would you like to start?
Yes, that's fine. So I think the pointers that I would give is, first and foremost, the prospective students need to be very clear about why they are applying for the NFP fellowship, and they need to be very focused in why, or in the first instance, how this joining this program or being part of ISS will help them in their work, in the work that they will be doing, and how they will gain new knowledge and take back that new knowledge to their organizations. Because essentially, as has been mentioned earlier, is that NFP seeks to build the capacity of different countries. So then they're building your capacity to take it back home. So then in your motivation, you really need to bring that out, the fact that you're going to gain new knowledge, new skills, new ways of doing things, and take that back. And taking that back, you're going to have like a certain way you're going to do it. Perhaps you could put that out in your action plan, and it would be useful for your organization. Yeah, you need to also show that the knowledge you gain is useful for your organization. Yeah.
Would you like to elaborate a bit?
Yeah. First, practical tips. Maybe you should write it first in the MS Word. There is actually a way there you can find how many characters you are. I mean, you already type. And then second, in terms of the content, that's actually the form. But in terms of the content, first, you please mention your position, what your work is, and be very, if you could enumerate your particular task and then relate it to what the specific program you are in. Like for instance, if it's for governance and development policy, if it's social policy and development, be very specific as to what aspect of those major could actually help or contribute to your work. Try to visit ISS website and check the programs. Maybe get some keywords there, and maybe reflect it on your motivation letter. And then, if it's possible, also mention if you already have some key ideas as to how you would go over your research paper. I mentioned a little about my research paper, some plans I have, and then put some keywords there on rule of law and food security, because I'm actually doing some stuff on food, on the food industry. So just highlighting what was said earlier. Put in some keywords there. So keywords that you would see in ISS and keywords that you would see in the Embassy of Netherlands in your country, like priorities, what the priorities are.
Okay. I think indeed these are both very good suggestions and tips, and I think it's also important. There are 1,000 characters, so that's the limit, but also to be as precise and concise as possible. Maybe use bullet points or make short, clear sentences. and make sure that every sentence has a value to it. You don't have to give a general introduction about your country, for example. You can skip those parts. You really have to focus it in on who you are, what your position is, where you're working, in what type of organization, and why you want to study this specific program to improve your own organization.
Okay. There is a question. Actually, there's 4 questions which is similar. They want to know what is the They want to have more clarification on private and public sector development on issues considered by NFP scholarship fellowship. Can you please explain more on what does it mean by private and public sector development?
Public sector is that's where people work for the government. So the public sector can be ministries, can be local governments, but also universities are also the public sector in general, or you have a private university, research institutes, those are all the public sector. The private sector can, for example, also be a consultancy firm. It can also be a private university. It can also be, I'm just thinking aloud, sometimes you have economic institutes which are private institutes, but working in the field of development studies. Those are seen also as private sector institutes. In general, organizations like a non-governmental organization, NGOs, are formally not public sectors, but they're not considered as part of the private sector. Private sector is more often related to making a profit.
Okay. Thank you, Vika. Another question. Is there a specific quota for countries in terms of how the NFP distribute the scholarship?
No, unfortunately not. No, it's not that there is the distribution in category 1 or category 2 countries, but there's not a fixed budget per country within those 2 categories. We wish it was there, because for us it's also difficult to feel what kind of students we should nominate for a scholarship, but we can't give you any information for that. So you are not only competing with people from your own country, but with people from the whole world, so to say.
Okay. Thank you, Vika. There's a question from a prospect from Bangladesh. He or she wants to know about, well, he is working in UNDP, but as a part-time. Will he be treated as a UN employee?
I'm afraid so, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Unless he has another position, working in what could be the case if you're working in another organization and you were only working for a short period part-time with a UN organization, then it might be different. But working part-time or full-time makes no difference. If that's your employer, then you're not eligible.
Okay. Can I defer my NFP application?
No, unfortunately not. You can defer your application to the MA program. Your admission letter is valid for 2 consecutive years. But if you are selected this year for an NFP scholarship, that doesn't, and you can't come this year, then you've lost it. And then you have to compete all over again in the next year.
Okay. As an independent consultant, can I still apply for the NFP scholarship?
No, unfortunately not, because you don't have an employer who will give an employer statement and make the promises that are requested for the NFP scholarship. So I'm afraid not. No.
Okay.
In fact, there is another scholarship program, the World Bank Scholarship Program. The link is provided on our website. You might be eligible for that program.
Okay. There's also one very specific question from a teacher in Bangladesh. She asked, I am teaching journalism and media studies in Bangladesh. I am not directly in the development sector, but I engage in human development sector. What issue should I focus on in my motivation?
I assume that you are accepted to the program. I would suggest to check on the website of the Dutch Embassy in Bangladesh what their priority areas are, whether you can see a clear link there. I know they do pay a lot of attention to child labor, for example, so maybe there is a link in that field. It's more the general capacity building of a country by teaching students. So that could also be a way of motivating your application. Maybe it's also about teaching your students about food security, rule of law, or one of those themes. So I would look into that type of arguments, but I would need more information to give a better advice.
Okay. Thank you, Vika. Maybe you have answered this, but there's this prospect asking if somebody is working in a non-government organization, is it possible to apply for NFP?
Yes.
Okay.
If your employer is willing and able to write and sign an employer statement, yes.
Okay. And who from the for the government statement, who from the government should be writing the employer statement?
If it's talking about the government statement, it's very clearly said who has the authority to sign the government statement, and that is again something that you have to check in your own country. Sometimes it's a certain office, and sometimes it can be done also by your employer. So that's something to check. The employer statement, it's for you to judge. On the one hand, it should be someone with sufficient authorities to sign sign the employer statement. On the other hand, the Dutch embassy might prefer that it's the head of the department or the team leader or that type of person who actually knows you and knows what you're doing, who should sign the employer statement. Because if you're coming back to your employer and you have to share your knowledge and expertise with your organization, it's much better that your actually manager is signing such an employer statement than that it's signed by the minister of your ministry, because it's not very likely for a normal employee to be known by the minister, him or herself.
Okay. Thank you, Vika. Can I save my application in Atlas and come back again?
No, unfortunately, that's not possible. You enter the Atlas system. Even if you have a cutback in electricity and internet is out, you will have to start all over again. So it's good to have all the documents prepared and to do the whole upload and the application in one go. But like I said, if you've forgotten something or the upload of a document is not working for one or another reason, just continue and send it to us, and then we can upload it for you.
Maybe a question for the students. What are the preparation that you do to apply for the NFP, other than making all the keywords for employee statement and things like that? What other preparation that you have done to make sure that you get all your documents and everything correctly? Maybe Naomi can go first.
Okay, so the first thing that you need to do is read through the Atlas, read through all the requirements. And the first requirement is the employer statement. So you need to get that ready in advance. You also need to get your passport ready. So for example, scan it and get it ready. Look at all the documents that are required and get them all ready. Put them in a folder, save them in a folder, so that at the time when you're making your application online, you have them, ready to just post there. Yeah.
Thank you, Naomi. Any tips, Jeremiah?
Basically the same thing with Naomi, but in addition, it's actually important for you to inform your employer first. Actually, it is important that prior to your application with ISS for admission and even for NFP scholarship, it is important. You should really inform your employer, because you would need the commitment letter. I mean the one of the requirements of the NFP. So just that in addition to Naomi's tips.
Okay. Thank you, Jeremiah and Naomi. A very specific question. A research assistant to a so he is working as a research assistant to a PhD applicant, or some professor working in food security and the other working in development area. Can I use them for my employer statement?
Some programs do, or some embassies are happy to support student assisted. It depends a bit on the formality of your position, but I guess you have been studying, and while you studied, you start working as an assistant to a professor already, so you have a contract with the university. It depends on how much or what the value is of such a contract. If it's just a temporary contract to help out a professor, that's not enough. But if you're really employed by the university, then you can that should work for an employer statement.
Now, thank you, Vika. If I'm not awarded with the NFP scholarship, can I reapply it? Can I, for example, the prospect is asking if he or she can, how do you say this? It's not the right word she's using. Can reapply for the NFP scholarship? That means rebut.
Yeah, well, the NFP scholarship program is open only once a year. So it's open now in February and early March. Now you are applying. Then we have to nominate candidates. If you are not nominated by the ISS, you will hear so by probably early April. So those of you who are not nominated by the ISS will hear so early, so you can search for other fellowship programs and try to find another scholarship. So the people who be nominated, they have a chance to get a scholarship. They will be informed late May or early June that they did receive a scholarship, or maybe they are on the reserve list, that we don't know. Then if you did not get the NFP scholarship, then your admission letter is valid for 2 years. So the next year in February you can try to apply again for a scholarship. And the fact that you did not get the scholarship does not mean that you are not a good candidate or that your application was not good. Some of the people that we are nominating are considered not eligible by the Dutch embassy. Then if that's the case, we always can see what exactly is the reason. Sometimes the reason is the employer statement is not of a valid employer. Sometimes the reason is the government statement is not sufficient. Sometimes you're working for an international organization, or your organization is considered to be an international organization. Then you will not be eligible the next year either, unless you change job or do it differently. But if you are considered eligible by the Dutch embassy, we can see that in the information that comes back to us. And then it's also a matter of luck, because there are many applications and they award the scholarships to the candidates with the highest score. And maybe you were not lucky this time, and maybe you are lucky next time.
Okay. Thank you, Vika. There's another question about refugees living here in the Netherlands. Can they apply for the NFP program?
No. If you're a refugee living in the Netherlands, you probably don't have an employer in your own country, so you can't have an employer statement that is supporting your applications. So unfortunately, that is not possible. If you have a refugee status, I would advise you to contact the UAF, University Assistance Fund, it's called. It's based in Utrecht, and that is a special Dutch organization, a foundation who is providing support for refugees living in the Netherlands to study in the Netherlands in a regular study program.
Okay. Is there a date where the NFP scholarship will be announced? Or?
It will be announced by the end of May. You will be informed whether you are accepted. Well, there are different stages, like I explained. The first stage is whether you will be nominated. We will inform you accordingly. But being nominated does not mean that you are actually getting a scholarship. So if I'm talking about figures, we don't know how many applications we're having, but we can nominate about, I think, a quarter to a half of the people who are applying and considered eligible. We can nominate for an NFP scholarship, and of the people we are nominating, about a third is actually getting a scholarship. So to give you a kind of idea of the chances that you have. And of course, if you're from Africa, and if you're a female candidate, and if you're working in one of the priority areas of the Dutch government, but also of the Dutch embassy, I think that was a very good suggestion of Naomi to check the website of the Dutch embassy on the priorities for a specific country. And if you fit within that profile, that is also very helpful to be nominated and to end up high in the ranking and to actually get a scholarship.
Thank you, Vika. To those students, prospects who have applied on deadline day, 1st of February, by when will they want to know when will they receive feedback and invitation to apply for NFP?
Yes, indeed, the application deadline at ISS was the 1st of February. My colleagues in the admission office are working very hard to process all the application. It depends on whether your application was complete. So once you have submitted your application in the ISS website, you will get a message from the admission office. Your application is considered complete and forwarded to the selection board. Then the selection board has to look at it, and the selection board is now very much on top of it because they know of the deadline. So we try to reach a decision within a week. So then you will hear the information shortly, but we first have to make sure that your application is complete and that there's no missing information. Then still it is possible to apply for the NFP because that system is open till the 9th of March. But what you could do is start already preparing the copy of the passport and the employer statement. So there's a lot of work you can do in advance already to prepare your application.
Okay. If somebody have not been awarded with the NFP scholarship, will they get a reason as to why they did not get the NFP scholarship so they can improve for next year?
Partly, if it's considered not eligible, then there is a clear reason why you are not accepted, and so we give you that reason. So if there is a mistake in your employer statement, or it's because your passport was not good, and those are things we can't control. If we're checking a passport and we think it's okay and it's sufficient, and then the embassy decides it's not because it's only valid till October and they consider that not long enough, then there's nothing we can do about it. Or what we've seen before is that the embassy tried to contact an employer and the employer did not answer. So I even think sometimes it's used as an excuse by the embassy, but that's something that we cannot control, and that's really something bad luck. But I think that's also an issue to look critical again at your employer statement and make sure that you make clear to your employer that they should be available to be contacted by the Dutch embassy. But on a certain moment, we also have to make a selection and a screening. Same at the embassy. There are more applications than there are scholarship available. So sometimes it's just that there are better candidates, and there's nothing you can do about that, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you, Vika. I'm afraid that we have answered all the questions.
Fantastic.
Maybe just a really general one. You can apply for multiple scholarships.
Yes.
Choose the best, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can apply for multiple scholarships, but within the NFP program, you can apply only for one study program. Right. Because the system will select out that you've applied to more universities, even the as we are not aware of it, the system will be aware of it. So you will be kicked out. But I would certainly advise you, if you will see on our website, we have a dedicated website where you can select from which country you are, and then we list a whole list of possible opportunities for scholarship. So I mentioned already the World Bank scholarship. There are also quite some national scholarship programs in various countries that you might want to apply for. And there are more programs listed. So I would really advise you to check on that database to see whether there are other scholarships. And I know that many of the students are applying not only for NFP but also for other scholarships. And I would certainly advise you to do so, because you do have a reasonable chance to get an NFP scholarship, but there's no guarantee. So please do so.
Okay, with that, there's no more questions, Wika, and Naomi and Jeremiah.
Maybe you have one last advice to the people there? It's difficult to, I think we all wish you all the best with your application. Do pay attention to it, make it as strong as possible, and have confidence in yourself to present yourself well. And we really hope that many of you will be successful in obtain an NFP scholarship, maybe not a scholarship, and that we will meet you here in The Hague at ISS, where it's at the moment quite cold. So, but maybe there will be some snow as well. Yeah. So we're really looking forward to see you, and if you have any further questions,